So I'm Celia Craig, and this is an Altaria Masterclass series about reed adjusting. And here I have my pupil, Neal, who's just learning how to make reeds, and we thought we might have a little go on camera at playing some reeds that are a bit too hard and seeing if we can adjust them. This is a good place to start. Rather than completely making your own reeds from the start, we'll take something that needs a bit of adjusting and see if we can improve it. Okay. So first of all, let's see if these reeds are a little bit too hard. I suspect they might be. Shall we crow them?
Yeah.
I'm having to use a lot of diaphragm to get that crow. That reed's too hard. There's too much effort to play it, isn't it? And even it's a bit. Just going to do a little tiny play just to double check that. But actually the crow told us what we needed really, didn't it? I'm going to play just a couple of notes. These reeds are too hard for us at the moment. We don't want to play concerts on them. So using our new equipment, first of all we'll take the mandrel, which is basically a handle, and pop it in there. It gives you something to hold on to, really. Eventually I'm going to teach you how to actually tie the reeds on. But these are reeds that were tied on by other people, well, me in that case. But when you're doing it yourself, you'll definitely need a mandrel. That stops the brass tube here from collapsing when you're pulling it really tight. So that's actually its main function, is to keep that brass tube there in the right shape. Because they're quite soft brass and you're going to pull really hard with your thread. But at the moment, we're just using it as a little handle. I'm putting the plaque in very carefully because this is the bit I don't want to damage, and I'm using my finger there to help guide. The plaque's just a piece of plastic, but it's carefully shaped and with the right aperture. It'll support the reed while we're scraping it and help us see what we're doing.
Okay.
You've got a clear one, so actually if I had a light, I'd be able to hold it up to the light and see what it looks like. The clear ones are good, but all plastic ones are good. Now using our knives, with the finger right behind what you're doing and the thumb sticking up a little bit, which can be like a little backstop, and the knife is going to move on the thumb. This is me doing it without touching. It's just moving a little bit, and then I'll push it down so that move it down so that the knife itself is touching the cane. That's it. And then a few little longish strokes with your sharp knife. That's lovely. You want to avoid gouging into the cane. You're just going to scrape off a little tiny bit. That's the perfect amount of little scrapings I can see are coming off it. When you go over the edge, like the tip, you want to go over the edge, but that's when you have to lift it up. You don't want to come back again, otherwise you might break the tip. The tip is incredibly important, you know that. So I go over the edge and I'm lifting it up a bit.
So a bit like this.
Very nice, that's good. And can you feel there's a little bump when it goes off onto the plaque from the tip?
Oh, yeah. That
bump's really important because that shows you how thick the tip of the reed is. And mine are really, really slim, but you know, like thin there. Also the sound is there. So if you overdo it just at the tip, you get what's not the most beautiful sound. But there's a balance between that and being able to actually play it. That's very nice scraping. I like the way your hand's moving and everything. And once you've done a reasonable amount of scraping on one side, when I'm saying reasonable, it doesn't matter how long it is, but as long as you do the same thing on the opposite side.
Okay.
You've got to keep it balanced. So you sort of remember how long you've taken and then do similar amount on the other side. Yeah. Otherwise you'll get a reed that's half.
Soft and half.
Yes, half and half. Now just while we're swapping it over, can I just also point out that, I'm sure Neal knows this already, but it's a nice time to point out that that's what the reed actually looks like when we get into tying on. That was once a long piece of cane and it's been folded in the middle there, scored. So you fold it in half and you wrap it onto your piece of into your staple, which is this thing when it's not There's a staple. And then we bind it on. But when we split this, the bit that we're scraping is actually the middle of the original piece of cane. And these pieces want to remain the same thickness, exactly the same thickness on both sides, because it's a double reed now, since we've split it up.
Okay.
If one side was harder than the other, it just won't play well. So we've now swapped it over, and we're going to do the same amount of scraping that we did on the other side, and then we can test it. Nice work. Now I can see that what you're doing is giving the right amount of, excuse me for a sec.
Yeah.
That is a lovely amount of little shavings that you're doing. It's just right. If you do it much more than that, then you'll be going a bit too hard. And you can also move back a bit and do a little bit out of the back. Seeing as they were so hard to crow, we know that we've got to take some of the cane out of the back. I get a bit fast when I go on the back, yes. Not too far down, not beyond where the scrape has already been. That's the nice thing about doing it on a reed that's half made already, because it gives you a template on how far down to scrape. If you were to scrape much further down on that reed, all the C's go flat. Sorry, but this is linking you right back to medieval, Renaissance, you know, not quite cavemen, but Greek oboists, the aulos, all sorts of, this has been going through millennia, people doing this to make reeds. I like that tradition. So mine's feeling a little bit closer. How does yours? Does it crow now?
Hopefully.
Bit better. Shall we also, because we've been doing a bit of scraping then, shall we also do a little bit with sandpaper? Now, not everybody uses these sandpaper things, but I find it essential. I use it all the time. I'm going to put the plaque in again. I've used a different one now, so you can see really carefully that the sandpaper is just going to smooth off what I've done. I'm going to curl it around my thumb. I don't want any edges anywhere near to the edge of the reed. If I was to scrape the edge of the reed like that, it's a disaster. So I'm just going to do the sand. That's fine. You just want to put the sandy bit there onto the reed, and you're just going to make it a bit softer, but you're not doing it with the knife this time, so it's going to even it all out. That's my idea. Seems to make it speak much better. You can actually go both directions. If you're very careful, you can go in both directions. You wouldn't do that with a knife. You never go back on the tip. But, and again, do both sides. Yep. Keep it even. I just got this sandpaper from the hardware store. Right. It's a little bit coarser than I normally use, but it seems to work fine. But you don't want to go onto it's incredibly fine sandpaper. Right, maybe you can just play us an A and we'll see. Because when reeds are too hard, they tend to be sometimes a bit flat. Let's see if we're at 40. Nah, it seems a bit low. Okay, right. So one of the things we can do is to make the opening, make the aperture a little bit closer, and then if necessary we should measure it and see if it's too long. Squeeze it maybe a little bit. Shall I show you how to wire it as well? Maybe I should. Right. First of all, let's take this off because it's only there to make the reed more airtight, and we don't need it right now. Okay. So with this bit of wire, I think this reed needs wiring to close it down a bit. So I put it roughly where I want to, which is a little bit. Here's one that's already wired, and you can see roughly the corner off there, but you can see roughly how far up it goes. Too high and it strangles the reed, too low and it does nothing. I'm going to just press it round, wrap it round once, and then pull it together with tweezers. This will help keep the sides together, and excuse me for a sec, here we go. So this is a very rough wiring. And then I'll pull it together with this. Couple of twists makes it a bit harder.
Okay.
And I can use it to pinch this reed a little bit closed because it was a very hard one. Not bad. It's got some something of a hard tip, so just quickly.
I mean, there we go.
Yeah, I'm going to do a little bit on the tip. So I'm just literally going over the tip. It's a bit too hard to play nicely still. So how about you can use your own mandrel so you get used to it, that's all. How about if you just go over the tip of that reed a little bit for me. But very softly, just on the very tip. Literally like the edge of a table, the tip is like, that's the end of the piece of wood. Okay. And then suddenly it stops. And you want it to kind of taper down a little bit more. Can you see all this stuff? That's right. And go over the edge. So that you're literally bouncing down off it, clicking onto the...
Oh, yeah.
I can tell this one's way too hard. It's like a doorstop.
I can hear that.
Yeah, and I'm very gently using my sharp knife. I haven't even talked about knife sharpening yet. That's why I have a razor strop sitting there. So I just gradually go over it a little bit with
Other side.
keeping it. Yeah, both sides always.
Yeah.
You just want that tip to look less like a doorstop. Actually, that's really something where you need the knife. We'll do sandpaper on this too, but it doesn't really solve it. The knife kind of is necessary to do kind of major surgery on your reed. But I am going to go over the edge a little bit now with sandpaper as well. And I reckon if you
bit of sandpaper now.
do it as well, then it will improve it. Just a little bit over the edge. That's good. Now, it's a long business. Don't expect to get the hang of it in 5 minutes, honestly. No. You know, I've been doing this for 30 years and it's still hard. Other bits of equipment that we've got here that you might use, you see, when I took that little bit of glad wrap, cling film we used to call it, off there, it's just to make sure whether that binding is airtight. Now, I used nail varnish. I used this nail varnish when I bound that one. So hopefully it's not too leaking anyway. Just if you want anything, people in the old days used to put beeswax. Beeswax is very good. Everything to just make sure that the air doesn't leak out of any of these areas on the side, the sides, and that, you know, you don't want to waste any air. So glad wrap is another way of doing it. Little rolls of this stuff, or white stuff that some people use, like here. It's got white stuff on it. So, what's the deal now? Does it sound any better?
Okay.
Sounds more reasonable, doesn't it? Oh, well done. That reed's got a nice sound. It's quite good, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a great feeling when you've adjusted your reed and you've improved it. You're like, I own this. Yeah. It's. Do you mind? Can I try it as well?
Sure.
See what. It's really not bad for a first effort. So I made it and you've done nearly all the scraping. I did part scrape it, but you've done nearly that. That's really good. I might just clean up the corners a little bit.
Yeah.
Very nice. And it didn't need that glad wrap really, because I made sure it was airtight in the first place.
Yeah.
Good job, Neal. What I haven't done is use my ruler, which I referred to earlier on. We were a tiny bit flat on this reed before, weren't we? Let's just see. Is it too long? It's just over 73. Now I'll play it a little bit and see whether it's flat for me, because if it is, we might cut the tip off, which is a whole new operation. Yeah, tell me, is it in tune? So the tuner's showing us that we're still a bit flat. Oh, sorry. So I think now might be the time to cut the tip off this reed. Right, because it was a bit long anyway. Stanley blade and some Japanese, these snap-off blades. These Japanese ones are really, really sharp, so I like them. And there are other ways of doing it. There are actually reed tip cutters that are very accurate and very nice. I still like the old way, but I'll show you with a reed tip cutter later if you want. Gonna slice a little bit off.
It's just nervous to watch.
Yeah. Not sure I should have done. Now it'll be a little bit too hard to play, but better in tune. There you go, you can test it for me. Play an A for me as well. Still coming out a little bit flat, but on the other hand, we haven't played much and we might be cold.
It's a bit harder now.
Yes, and it's harder to play. So I'm just going to do the tip again, or you are. Remember using just a little tiny motion across off the edge of the tip. So just starting really quite close. I want to make the tip small again. And you have to be very gentle with this bit because you could rip off, this is the thinnest part of the reed, you could rip off a big hole out of the tip like this may have happened onto that one. Good, very gently. It's a very dangerous, delicate operation, the tip of a reed. And you've done both sides?
No, I'm just
Cool.
do this side now.
And you're going right off the edge?
I need to go a bit closer.
Because we're trying to remove that cane from that reed off the edge and maybe nice. Be careful not to go too far back or you might spoil its sound and it might have changed into a dodgy sound. How about a little finishing off with sandpaper as well? Mm-hmm. But you've literally never done this before,
Nope.
have you? The first time today. It's a great feeling if you improve your reeds. It's really a great feeling.
Yeah.
And the other side will make sure it stays even. I think I can afford, if I'm very gentle, to go backwards and forwards off the tip a little bit. I only do a tiny bit of this.
I think I'll just do the basic just so I don't actually damage it.
Yeah, and then you get very precious about your reeds because you've spent a long time working on this and you don't want it to be...
Yeah.
Time to give it a little play again. You have to keep testing them. You have to be optimistic too.
Yeah.
I'm optimistic this is going to be lovely. A very good first attempt at reed adjusting, very good. We're a tiny bit on the low side, but our oboes have been sitting around slightly cold.
Yeah.
So it's better than going sharp. I'd rather err on the low side because you can always make a reed sharper, but you can't make it flatter easily. See, does that make sense? Yeah. While you're reed making, you can cut tips off and do things, but when it's too sharp, you've had it.
Yeah.
And you know, you're not very warm at the moment. The oboe's not super warm.
No.
So congratulations, and you've just improved your reed from a reed that was too hard to one which is going to be much more playable now. That's really impressive on a first go. And yes, thank you for watching.